Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to What If Naruto at the Three Tails Part 6. Last time on the What If, the final part of the Chunin exams took place with Naruto winning his fight against Neji after Neji ran out of chakra, making him unable to move. And during the fight between Sasuke and Gaara, the Konoha Crush began, which led to Naruto fighting Gaara, and the Third Hokage fighting Orochimaru. And after a battle with the real Shukaku and a giant fight with Gamabunta turning into the Three Tails, Naruto was able to punch Gaara in the face, making Shukaku get suppressed right back into him, and Gaara passed out, thus making Naruto the winner of the fight. And during the Crush, the Third Hokage died. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so begin this what if around a week after the funeral for the Third Hokage, and currently Jiraiya is having a meeting with the elders of the village, and they are asking him to become the next Hokage, which he refuses, but they keep insisting because Jiraiya is the only one strong enough for the position, and he's the last Sannin left that still has a connection to the leaf. And after a bit of time, Jiraiya was able to come up with a replacement for himself, which was Tsunade. And after a bit of persuading, the elders agreed that this would be a good idea, but since they didn't know where Tsunade was, they tell Jiraiya that it is his mission to go find her. And after the elders said this, Jiraiya got up, and he began to walk away. But before he completely left, he asked if he was allowed to bring a certain yellow-haired Genin, which they agreed to. And after a couple minutes, Jiraiya was able to find Naruto, who was walking down a random road after his daily missions. And when he got to Naruto, he asked him if he wanted to go on a journey with him, which Naruto declined almost immediately. But hearing this, Jiraiya just starts walking away, and he just says that he will ask Sasuke instead, and he will teach him a jutsu that would make the Chidori look like a small spark. And after hearing this, Naruto began to run to his house, and while he was running, he shouted for Jiraiya to meet him at the front gates. And after around an hour, the two begin their journey. And after a couple more hours, the two make it to a nearby town, and once they get there, Jiraiya gets distracted by a woman, so he gives Naruto the key to the hotel room, and he tells him to wait for him there. And after a couple minutes, Naruto gets to the room, and when he does, he goes into the mindscape, and he talks to the Three Tails, and the two have a discussion about whether or not Naruto should stick with Jiraiya, because sure, he has taught them the summoning jutsu, and they have become a lot stronger since they met him, but Jiraiya gets easily distracted, and that leads to him not teaching Naruto anything. But before they get to an actual conclusion, the two hear a knock on the door, so Naruto quickly got out of the mindscape and woke up. Then Naruto walked to the door, and when he opened it, he expected Jiraiya, but what he actually saw outside was two men in black cloaks with red cloud designs. But what caught Naruto's eye the most was the fact that one of the men had red eyes similar to the Sharingan. But before anyone could do anything, Sasuke appeared at the end of the hallway, and he electrified one of his hands, forming the Chidori. Then he ran at the guy with red eyes, but to the two's surprise, the red-eyed man was able to easily stop Sasuke. So he now has Sasuke pinned to a wall by Sasuke's neck. And seeing this, Naruto tries to go into the initial form, but when he tried, he felt strong one second, then he felt weak the next, and this kept going on for a couple of seconds. But after a couple of seconds, Isobu told Naruto that the person he was fighting had a sword that seemed to be draining out his chakra. And hearing this, Naruto decided he should make it so the guy couldn't use the sword at all. So he went to hit the guy on the shoulder to try to make quarrel so the guy couldn't move. But Kisame was able to get out of the way just in time, making Naruto begin to move past Kisame. And while Naruto was moving and off balance, Kisame went to slash Naruto with his sword. But before the blade could hit, a toad appeared in between the two, and seeing the toad, Naruto looked behind him. And when he does, he sees Jiraiya. And thinking Jiraiya could handle Kisame, Naruto ran at Itachi to try to save his teammate. But when he turned his head and began to run, Kisame ran after Naruto, and he went to slam him with his sword. But before the attack could hit, Jiraiya used a summoning jutsu to cover the entire hotel hallway and a Totosophagus, which absorbed the two Akatsuki members into the walls, which made it so Kisame's attack was cancelled. And seeing that they needed to escape, Itachi used Amaterasu to burn a hole in the wall, and when the hole was big enough, the two fled. And after a couple seconds, the two were completely gone. And after a couple more seconds, Guy appeared, and he took Sasuke back to the leaf so he could get healed and patched up. So now we skip a couple of hours, and the two were able to make it to the next town. And once the two make it to the town, Jiraiya took Naruto's wallet, and he gave him a small percentage of what Naruto had. Then he tells Naruto that he should enjoy the nearby stands, and have fun while he goes to see if he can get any information on Tsunade and her current location. And after an hour of Naruto walking around, Naruto decided that he was done. So he then grabbed two octopi on sticks, and he began to look around for Jiraiya. And after a couple minutes, Naruto was able to see Jiraiya surrounded by women, with his wallet empty on a nearby table. And when he sees this, he starts to shout and thrash around in anger. And after a minute of Naruto having a tantrum, two men walk into the room. And when they walk in, Naruto hits one of the men with an octopus, which made a stand on the guy's suit. And when Naruto hit the guy and his friends started to shout Naruto, and they were about to hit him. But before the attack could land, and before Naruto could fight back, Jiraiya appears right in front of Naruto. Then he tells him to pay close attention. Then in a span of a couple of seconds, a blue sphere of chakra appears in the palm of Jiraiya's hand. And when it was formed, Jiraiya hit the man with the stand with it, launching him across the road into a balloon stand. And when the man made contact with the stand, he almost completely destroyed the stand, with only a bunch of balloons still intact. And once the man landed, Jiraiya walked over to the stand and he bought all the balloons that were still together. And once Jiraiya got all the balloons he could, he and Naruto left the town and they went into the nearby woods. And when they were in the nearby woods, Jiraiya hands Naruto a water balloon. Then Jiraiya began to explain the Rasengan, and how it was created by the 4th Hokage, and once he was done explaining what it was, he began to explain what the first step to mastering the jutsu was, which was rotation. And how he will be learning to do this is by making the water spin the balloon until the balloon pops with just his pure chakra. And when Jiraiya finished speaking, Naruto began to train, and he kept on training for around 3 days, but he didn't seem to make that much progress since the first day. And on the morning of the 4th day, Naruto was eating breakfast, and while he was eating, a cat was playing with one of his balloons that rolled off the table, and when he saw it, he began to get up to get the balloon back. But before he could get to his feet, the water balloon popped, and seeing that the cat was able to pop the balloon, Naruto tossed the cat another balloon to see how it did it the first time. And an hour later, Naruto put what he saw to use, and after around 5 hours, Naruto was able to do the Rasengan in his own way, because unlike how Jiraiya showed him, Naruto had to use both of his hands in order to make the balloon pop. And the next morning, Naruto told Jiraiya that he had finished the first step, and after Naruto showed him in the woods, Naruto was given a rubber ball, and he was told that he will not have to do the same thing, but just with a rubber ball. So now it's skip a couple of weeks, and Naruto still hasn't been able to make that much progress since the first couple of days. And Naruto's hands are in constant pain because he's been constantly forcing out chakra out of them at a fast rate, daily. So one night, Naruto was really tired and he decided that he was done for the night, so he decided to go all out for his final attempt. So he put the rubber balloon in both of his hands, and he began to force chakra into it, and after a couple of seconds, he began to use even some of his Sobu's chakra, and with the help of these two things, Naruto was able to pierce the balloon, so there was now a small hole, and after a couple of seconds, it was completely deflated. But since the balloon did not completely pop, he wasn't done, so he kept going for a couple more days, but eventually after those days, Jiraiya decided to help Naruto a bit, so he drew a spiral on his hands, which allowed Naruto to visualize how he should have his chakra better. And with the help of this, Naruto was able to completely pop a balloon after another day's training. And once Naruto showed Jiraiya, Jiraiya handed Naruto another balloon, and he told him that he was mostly done, and that he is on the final step, which is combining the two things he's learned, which was rotation and power. But now he has to make it stable. And when Jiraiya was done explaining, Naruto was about to begin training. But seeing Naruto begin to start, Jiraiya stops him, and he tells him that he'll have to do the training on the road, because he just got some new information about Tsunade, and they should hurry to her last known location. So now he skipped to that night, and during the whole day, Jiraiya wasn't able to find Tsunade, and Naruto wasn't able to master the final step. And once they were done with the final location, Jiraiya assumed that Tsunade was gone by this point, and he decided that Naruto and him should have dinner for the night. So they went to a nearby restaurant, and when they walked in, Jiraiya noticed a familiar looking woman with blonde hair. So he then told Naruto to follow him, and the two began to walk to her table. And when they get to the table, they sit across from Tsunade and Shizune. Then they begin to talk, and after a bit of talking, Jiraiya tells Tsunade how she's been chosen to be the next Hokage. And after Jiraiya told her this, she declined the offer, and she said that whoever would choose to be Hokage was an idiot. And when Naruto hears this, he gets mad, and after some yelling between the two, Naruto challenges Tsunade to a fight, which she accepted. So the two then walked out of the restaurant, and they stepped a couple feet away from each other. And when Naruto was ready, he began to channel the 3 tails of chakra into him, and after a couple of seconds, his skin began to change colors. So his skin became gray, and his back extended out, creating a shell with spikes. And once he felt like he was done changing, Naruto began to shoot out water bullets, but Tsunade was able to avoid them all with ease. And seeing that this wasn't working, Naruto decided that he needed to make Coral on Tsunade. So he then began to run towards Tsunade, and once he was somewhat close, Naruto jumped into the air, and while he was being flung, he curled himself into a ball, so his shell was mostly the only thing that was exposed. But seeing Naruto spin towards her, Tsunade put a finger in front of her, and when he got close enough, she flicked his shell, and that flick was so hard that Naruto got flung back a couple feet, almost to where he originally was standing, and Naruto even transformed back to normal. And when Naruto landed, he was dizzy from spinning so much, but once he was able to get his vision to focus, Naruto went back to his feet, and seeing that he was outmatched in strength, Naruto decided that if he needed to win, he had to use a Rasengan. So he began to channel chakra into his hands, and he began to form a Rasengan. And while he was channeling his chakra into his hands, he was covering himself in Asobu's chakra, making him begin to transform again. And because Naruto still hasn't mastered the Rasengan he's making is imperfect. And when Naruto believed that it was stable enough, and when he felt like he was done transforming, he began to run towards Tsunade again. But this time, when he jumped, he didn't curl into a ball, and instead he just jumped at her with the Rasengan aimed at her stomach. But before the Rasengan hit, Tsunade was able to get out of the way, and she grabbed Naruto by the ankle. And before he was able to do anything, Tsunade slammed him to the ground. And when he landed, his Rasengan hit the ground. And when it did, it created another crater right next to Naruto. And when Naruto hit the ground, he transformed again back to normal. Then Tsunade began to shout Jiraiya about teaching Naruto the Rasengan. And she was able to assume based off Naruto's transformation, where he turned into a snapping turtle human hybrid, that he was a Jinchuriki for the 3 tails. And eventually, after a bit of yelling and arguing at Jiraiya, Tsunade said that Naruto will never be able to master the Rasengan, which made Naruto and her begin to argue some more. And after a bit of time, Tsunade makes a bet with Naruto, which was, if he could master the Rasengan in a week, she would give him her necklace that was once owned by the first Hokage. And hearing this, Naruto accepts the deal. Then he immediately went to the forest to begin training. So now we skip to the night before the deadline, and Naruto still hasn't mastered the Rasengan. And that night, Naruto was really tired, and he went for one final Rasengan using the rest of his remaining chakra. But even with this, Naruto still wasn't able to make it stable, so it disappeared after touching a tree for a couple of seconds. And the second that the imperfect Rasengan disappeared, Naruto passed out from exhaustion. And when he woke up, he found himself not in the woods or in his hotel room, but in a new room he's never seen before. And after looking around the room, he sees a word Shizune. And when Shizune knows that Naruto is awake, she was surprised to see that he's even awake, because when she examined him, she believed that he would have been knocked out for at least a couple of days. And hearing this, Naruto was about to give her an explanation, but before he could say a word, Shizune remembered why she was worried. So she then told Naruto to follow her. Then she began to open a nearby window, and she was about to jump out of it. But before she was able to completely jump out of the window, a kunai flies past her face. And when the kunai flies past her, she looks to see where it came from. And when she does, she sees a drugged up Jiraiya. And after a bit of talking, she tells the two of them about the deal between Tsunade and Orochimaru. Then she tells them to follow her, to where the deal is taking place. So now we skip to when the three get there, and when they get there, they see Kabuto standing above Tsunade, about to put her out of commission. But before he does, Naruto and Shizune ran at Kabuto, and while Naruto was running at Kabuto, he was shooting out water bullets, which Kabuto was able to mostly avoid. And while the two were going for Kabuto, Jiraiya goes for Orochimaru. And after a bit of time fighting between the two groups, Kabuto ran back to Orochimaru, and he used his own blood on a seal on Orochimaru's arm to summon the twin-headed snake. And seeing them summon a giant creature, Naruto and Jiraiya tried to summon Gamabunta, but instead of summoning Gamabunta, the two summoned two small toads, with them being Gamakichi and a new toad by the name of Gamatatsu. Then after Naruto summoned his toad, he ran back to the fight between Shizune and Kabuto. But even with the two of them, Kabuto was able to deal with them. And when Naruto and Shizune were both on the ground in pain, Kabuto with a kunai in his hand went to stab Tsunade. But before he was able to land the attack, Naruto got back up and he grabbed the kunai with his hand by the blade, which made it go somewhat deep into his hand. Then seeing that he needed to move, Kabuto went to release his hand. But before he could, Naruto began to surround Kabuto's and his own hand with a layer of coral, which made it really hard for Kabuto to leave. And right after Naruto made the coral, he made a shadow clone which appeared right next to him. And with the clone's help, Naruto was able to make a perfect Rasengan in his remaining hand. And when he was ready, Naruto hit Kabuto in the gut with the Rasengan. And because they were connected by the layer of coral, it took a couple of seconds before the coral broke entirely, which allowed Kabuto to get flung a couple feet away. And because Kabuto took the full brunt of the attack longer, he took more damage. But before Kabuto got too far, he was able to tear the muscles around Naruto's heart, which almost immediately caused Naruto to get knocked out and fall to the ground, and began to slowly die. But before he could die, Tsunade was able to heal him, but he was still knocked out. And shortly after Naruto gets knocked out, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, with the help of an injured Kabuto, summoned their creatures. And after a bit of fighting between the three, Orochimaru and Kabuto decide that the best option is to escape. So now we skip a couple of days, and Naruto finally heals to 100%. And when he wakes up, he finds a necklace on him, and he then learns that Tsunade will become the next Hokage. And a couple days after that, the four make it back to the Leaf. And when they do, Tsunade goes to see Lee, Sasuke, and Kakashi just like in the canon. So now we skip a couple days after Tsunade gets back to the Leaf, and Naruto and Sakura were hanging out in Sasuke's hospital room. And while they were there, Sasuke was getting mad at himself for him not being strong enough to be able to kill his brother. And he even got madder that Naruto seems to be getting a lot stronger than him at a fast rate. So after a couple minutes, Sasuke began to get angry and he began to yell at Sakura and Naruto. And after a bit of this, Sasuke challenged Naruto to a fight which he accepted. So the two then walked to the roof of the hospital, with Sakura closely behind them trying to get them to stop. And after around a minute, the two get to the roof. And when the two got onto the roof, the two began to fight. And when they did, Naruto began to surround himself with a bit of the three-tailed chakra. And after a couple of seconds, he was powered up to the point where he had a bit of visual chakra surrounding him. But it wasn't enough to make him transform, while Sasuke activated the Sharingan. And after some fighting between the two decided that they wanted to go for one final clash. So Naruto began to surround himself with the three-tailed chakra even more. So he was now in the initial form, and he began to create the Rasengan. And while he was doing this, Sasuke was putting lightning nature chakra into one of his hands. And when the two were ready, the two began to run as fast as they could towards each other. But before the two collided, Kakashi was able to grab both of them by the wrist. Then he chucked the two of them at separate water towers. And after a bit of talking, Naruto and Sakura leave the hospital while Kakashi had to talk with Sasuke about not attacking his teammates. But even after this talk, Sasuke was still mad about how he doesn't seem to be getting any stronger. And later that night, Sasuke gets a visit from the Sound 4. And after a bit of talking, he decided to go with him to get stronger. And once he agreed, the Sound 4 go to the front gate and they wait for Sasuke. But on Sasuke's way to the gate, he walks through the park. And while he was in the middle of the park, he gets stopped by Sakura, who tried to stop him from leaving. And after that didn't seem to work, she pleaded for him to take her with him. But after a couple minutes of this, Sasuke quickly appeared behind Sakura, and he hit her in the back of the head, knocking her out almost instantly. Then Sasuke leaves. And after a couple minutes of walking, he meets with the Sound 4 and they began to run to Orochimaru's lair. So now he skips that morning, and when some shinobi were walking down the path, they saw Sakura passed out on a bench. And when they saw her, they woke her up. And when they did, they learned about Sasuke's betrayal. And the same things happen, and the same group is at the gate. And after a bit of time, they leave. And all the fights will be the exact same. This includes the Sand Shinobi and Rock Lee. So now it's Naruto and Sasuke at the Valley of the End. And once Naruto got to the valley, Naruto shouted at Sasuke, asking does he know how many of their friends could be hurt or even killed because of what he's done? And Naruto was going to keep talking, but before Naruto could say anything else, Sasuke interrupts him and he tells Naruto that he will not return to the village, and that this is the only way for him to get strong enough for him to become an Avenger and kill his brother. Then he says that if he really wants to stop him, he will have to fight him. So Naruto, hearing this, immediately covers himself with a three-tailed chakra, and he began to transform. And after a couple of seconds, Naruto's skin began to turn gray, and his skin became denser, with his back back becoming a shell, and after a couple of seconds he was done transforming. And once he was done transforming, Naruto began to run towards Sasuke. And while Naruto was running, Sasuke activated the Sharingan, and the two began to fight using taijutsu. And while they were fighting, Naruto tried to use his coral to weaken Sasuke, but whenever he tried to make contact with Sasuke with his palms, Sasuke would either avoid or block the armor entirely, because he knows of Naruto's coral. And even with Naruto making a bit of coral on Sasuke, which slowed him down somewhat, Sasuke was a bit faster than Naruto, and with the help of the Sharingan, Sasuke was able to avoid most of Naruto's attacks. And after a couple minutes of this, Sasuke was able to sweep kick Naruto, making him lose balance. And while Naruto was beginning to fall, Sasuke was able to grab Naruto by one of his wrists, and he threw Naruto off the valley, which made him begin to fall. But before Naruto hit the water below, Naruto made a Shadow clone right under him, and when it was fully formed, Naruto jumped off the clone and he landed on the side of the valley. And once he was ready, Naruto made 9 Shadow clones, and they all began to run up the valley wall towards Sasuke. And while the Narutos were running, they were firing out water bullets. But before they were able to get to the top, Sasuke jumped off the valley, and when he was level to the group of Narutos, he fired a fireball jutsu, which hit all the Narutos head on. And when the attack hit, all the clones Naruto just made disappeared. And now a partially burned Naruto began to fall into the lake below. And since he has nothing to stop him, he falls directly into the water below, and he sank at a fast pace. And seeing Naruto not come up after some time, Sasuke believed that he had killed Naruto, so he began to feel an intense pain in his head. And when he stopped, he had the third Tomoe Sharingan. And after he realized that he had the third Tomoe, he began to walk away. But while Sasuke was walking away, the water under him began to swirl around more than it did a second ago. And every second that passed, the water seemed to get more and more rapid. And after a couple of seconds, Naruto appeared out of the water, with visible chakra surrounding him. And while he was getting his balance, he was doing hand signs. And after a couple more seconds, he finishes the jutsu by doing the bird hand sign. Then he shouts, "Water release, great waterfall technique." Then the water around them started to spin even faster than it did before, and the water even raised into the air. And within a couple of seconds, the two were trapped in a tsunami, and they got flung around the valley, with them hitting the valley walls multiple times. And after around a minute, the vortex stopped. And when it did, Naruto and Sasuke landed on some trees that were torn from the ground by the vortex. Then, because they were both heavily injured, the two decided to go for one final clash. So Naruto began to surround himself the best he could with a 3-tailed chakra. So he has one tail made out of pure chakra. And while Naruto was gathering chakra, Sasuke was covering himself with a curse mark. And once the curse mark was spread across his body enough, he began to transform, with his skin turning purple, and he began to grow hand-like wings. And while he was transforming, he put on his headband. And once he was done changing, he began to put lightning nature chakra into his hand. And after a couple of seconds, he was able to make a Chidori. And while Sasuke was making the Chidori, Naruto began to focus chakra into his hand. And after a couple of seconds, Naruto was able to make a perfect Rasengan on his own. And once they were done creating jutsu, they began to run on water towards each other. And once they got close enough and gained enough speed, the two jumped at each other. And they both aimed their jutsus, with Sasuke aiming his Chidori at Naruto's heart, and Naruto aiming his Rasengan at Sasuke's headband, since he still doesn't want to kill him. And when the attacks collide, it creates a giant explosion, launching the two away. And when the two land, Naruto was knocked unconscious from the attack, and Sasuke was heavily injured with a couple of his bones broken. But even with this, he was strong enough to escape before Kakashi appeared an hour later. And when he gets there, he takes Naruto to the doctors as fast as he can, and Naruto was able to survive because of this. And a week after the mission, Naruto was asked if he wanted to go on a 3-year journey with Jiraiya, which he agreed to, since he needs to get stronger so he can get Sasuke back. And days later, after Naruto agreed, Naruto and Jiraiya left for the 3-year journey, leading them to the plot of Shippuden. And that's where I'm going to leave the What If. I hope you enjoyed this whole series. It's been a lot of fun doing this What If, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.